Good morning, everyone. We're so glad you can join us this morning on October 15th to have Mr. Sawyer Mahler talk to us about the Metropolitan Organization, TMO. A little bit more about what is the work of TMO, how does that line up with our congregation, and what are some current things that we need to know as not just informed Christians, but as informed Christians within this society here in the city of Houston and in Harris County. So without further ado, Sawyer, please.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me today. Like Pastor Rodriguez mentioned, my name is Sawyer Mahler. I work for an organization called TMO, the Metropolitan Organization. TMO has been in the Houston area for over 40 years now. It's what we call, it's kind of a funny description, a community power building organization. So what we do is we target issues around the city or around the state of Texas, and we build power around them. We connect with institutions like this one and others all across the city to build people power. About 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, we focus in on a specific issue. We're nonpartisan, so we don't pick a candidate or a party, but we pick political issues, policy issues, community issues that we think affect a large portion of the area's population. Right now, what that looks like is what you have in front of you, maybe, the larger sheet of paper. That is for information on the Harris Health Bond. Has anyone here heard of the Harris Health Bond? Yeah. So the Harris Health Bond is a bond that's going to be on the ballot this November. So in a few short weeks, actually, which is kind of weird to think. In a few short weeks, this will be on the ballot. It's a bond put forward by Harris Health, the government armed institution that operates and maintains all the public hospitals in Harris County. So late last spring, Harris Health, the system, went before the County Board of Commissioners and asked them to put this on the ballot. They deliberated all summer, and then in mid-August or so, by unanimous decision, the County Board of Commissioners voted to place it on the ballot. And so now they're turning over the decision to voters of Harris County like yourself. I imagine everyone here lives in Harris County and no Fort Benders or anything like that. So on November, on your ballot, amongst many, many other propositions and things, as you probably know, someone told me Texas has the largest ballots in the democracy world. So yeah, Texas loves amendments, Texas loves propositions, and this will be one of many. I can't speak to all of them at length, but this will be one of them. This is definitely an important one. This will be on the ballot in November, and the idea is to inject $2.5 billion from this bond into the Harris Health system. So Ben Taub, LBJ, a number of dozens of clinics across the city, and then not only injecting funds into pre-existing facilities, but creating a few new ones, namely a totally new hospital and a few more clinics in areas of the city that are currently underserved when it comes to clinics. So what we hear, a large portion of like TMO's work is conversations with members of congregations, conversations with community leaders, with congregation leaders, with any number of officials and bureaucrats and things like that, and just regular people as well who aren't affiliated with anything. And so what we've kind of derived from those conversations and prior to our decision to get behind this and put our organizing energies behind this was that figuring out, was this needed? And from those conversations, we kept hearing a lot about how there were extremely long wait times at Harris Health, how there were not enough bed capacities at many of the facilities, how one of the big things about this bond too is that there is not enough trauma capacity that these hospitals currently have. So trauma being the worst things that you could go to the hospital for, terrible car accidents, terrible gunshot wounds, things like that. And that these hospitals, currently as they are, can't meet the needs fully of the areas that they serve. One thing that you probably noticed, I imagine everyone has lived in Harris County or Houston for some time, that the city and the county have doubled in size, tripled in size, skyrocketed in size over the last 2 or 3 decades. but the public health system has not kept up with that growth, with that population growth. It has not had the needed injection of funds, the needed injection of new resources for a county, an area, metropolitan area of this size. And not only do these hospitals and do these systems serve members of Harris County, but they also serve members due to a lack of robust public health systems in those counties, the surrounding counties. It serves a lot of people who aren't even necessarily from Harris County. So not only are these hospitals serving people with maybe a trauma or a gunshot wound or a car accident, which any one of us could sadly find ourselves in at some time, they also serve the uninsured and the underinsured, which maybe you know as well, Texas has a very, very high, sadly, uninsured and underinsured population. I believe the highest in the country, if I'm correct. And then Harris County and Houston metropolitan area have within Texas the highest rates of uninsured in the state. So these hospitals see a lot of demand, they provide for those with the greatest needs, essentially, for these services. So yeah, so this $2.5 billion will be injected into the system, will completely overhaul some of the pre-existing hospitals like Ben Taub, like LBJ, and it will also create a totally new hospital as well as 3 new clinics in the region. And so right now what we're doing as a power building organization, as a community organization, we are working with the institutions already in our network, which is about 35 or so that are members of TMO, as well as a large number of institutions that aren't currently in our network, like this one. So I've been going to institutions like this one on weekends and during the week, and doing similar discussions with them and sharing similar information with them and kind of recruiting them in this effort to get out the word about this bond and become a part of this organizing effort in some way. And that can look a number of different ways. There's no one size fits all for the institution. Every institution is different. Every institution has different wants, needs, capacities, things like that. What I kind of generally break it down into is sort of the internal organizing behind something like this and the external organizing. With the internal organizing, both are equally important, I think, and both can be equally impactful. With internal organizing, what that mainly looks like is gathering, organizing within everybody within the congregation, within all members of the congregation, to not only get them informed about this bond measure and to let them know that it's happening and going to be something that's going to be on the ballot, but trying to get their commitment, trying to, like, some organizations, some institutions might be like, oh, we want to get 75% committed to voting this year and voting for this bond, or 85% or 95%, 100%. So it can look like that. It can look like just getting everybody you know who comes here every Sunday aware of this and then ready to vote for it. It can look a little bit bigger than that, where it can be like, not only are we going to commit to getting everyone within our congregation aware of this and ready to vote for it, but we're also going to get maybe 3 or 4 people or 5 people within our immediate network, our brother, sister, mom, dad, friends, family, neighbors, children who are of voting age, aware of this and ready to vote for it. So it can look like that. And then it can look like, with an external side of it, it can look like, all right, branching off into the community. It can look like, if you'd like to hold a phone banking one night and making calls into, we're targeting with this vote likely voters, because we know they're going to be at the polls, we just don't know if they're going to be aware of this ballot measure. So it could be look like that. It was like making phone calls to likely voters around the area, people who live not too far from here, making sure they're aware. It's going to look like knocking on doors to those voters for a night out of canvassing. So it can look like any combination of all of these things. It's really whatever the congregation is comfortable with and the congregation wants to do. So yeah, that's kind of the general, my general spiel. I could speak a lot more in detail to, there's a lot on that paper, the large piece of paper I passed out, about some of the more details of the Harris Health Bond, And then, so I think another important thing to add actually is that next weekend, my organization TMO will be holding what we call an accountability session and get out the vote rally. So that's that medium-sized piece of paper that maybe is in front of you, the sort of flyer-sized one. So what that is, and it's kind of like a hallmark thing of TMO that it has been doing for the last 40 years, is it's an accountability session. So since we are nonpartisan, we don't endorse candidates, but we do understand the important role that whoever is the next mayor, whoever is the next person in such and such a position will play in doing the things that we'd like to see them do, enacting the changes that we'd like to see them enact. And so we call it an accountability session because beforehand we list or we write out as a group, as an organization, 4 or 5 questions on specific issues that we would like to have a solid yes or no answer to. Basically like our agenda as an organization. So the number 1 issue that we'll be asking them about, or that will also be sort of rallying our network for, is this bond question. It's like how they stand on the implementation of this bond. Are they supporters of it? Are they not supporters of it? And why? And we'll be rallying our network behind not necessarily voting for any of these candidates, because like I said, we don't endorse anybody, but getting out to vote for this bond. So we'll likely see from our institutions anywhere from 500 to 600 people from across Greater Houston at this rally, representing anywhere from 30 to 40 different institutions. So obviously, I'd love to extend an invite to all of you. If you're interested, we'd be more than happy to have Christ the King representation, and it'd be great to have you. Our idea is that the more people we have, the more visible power we have as an organization, as a network of largely faith institutions, but also secular institutions as well. And we cover all denominations of Christianity, Lutheran, Methodist, Catholic, different forms of Protestant. And then also a few synagogues and a few mosques, and yeah, non-religious institutions as well. So it's a really great opportunity to see the form of political organizing we do, the form of power building that we do, in a really tangible way, before all these mayors who have agreed to come to this, because they know of TMO, they know of the network that we wield, and they want to come before us and sort of not necessarily earn our vote, but speak to us as a powerful network. But yeah, so that's kind of my spiel. I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions. I will say I'll preface by saying I'm not an expert on everything that is related to this bond or about Harris Health. So I can't speak to every single detail, but I'll try my best.
Have you encountered much opposition to this?
So that's a good question. So there's no formal opposition that exists. There's no like other groups like TMO that are organizing against the bond or going to institutions like this one and trying to get people to say no to the bond, which is a good thing. But there are definitely, I guess, the opposition would be A, people don't know about it, and B, people are hesitant. I mean, anytime there's like, oh, there's getting to be an increase in an increased tax or something like that, tacked on something, there's obviously going to be opposition, which is totally understandable and totally reasonable. So that, yeah, so with that, I guess an important detail to get is that this bond, the increase that some might see on their taxes, the way they've determined it is if you are an average homeowner in the city or in this county, which is they've determined at $300,000 for your home, you'd see $6 every month for the existence of the bond, which is estimated at this time to be about 15 years. But yeah, so no formal opposition, so I guess to round up the answer, but definitely opposition and hesitancies and questions.
Yeah. Do you work with, or do you communicate with the Houston Chronicle in terms of, do you write letters, or do you suggest things to the editorial board? I know they've been featuring, I don't read every day, but they've been featuring a lot of propositions for the upcoming election. I think it's fun.
You have to, yeah.
Just one thing, if you're speaking from there, if you can just repeat the question, just.
Oh, okay. The question was if we're in communication with the Houston Chronicle, mainly their editorial board, I imagine, about this issue. There's no formal, yeah, I don't think we've formally been in contact. I've heard I don't read the Chronicle every day either, but I've heard that there has been either op-eds in there about supporting this, or I think mainly supporting it. You have seen that? Oh, okay, great. So I have heard that there has been some articles in the Chronicle supporting it from the editorial section.
I'm just wondering if your organization overall or other issues.
Yeah, I'm not sure what our history there is. I'd have to look into that a bit more. Any other questions?
Thoughts, comments?
Yeah, that's comments.
Commentaries?
Well, I'd just like to give a personal testimony because I have driven people to the various clinics for appointments. These are under 100 people, and I've been so impressed. I had no idea that this, I guess I'd heard of Harris Health, but I had no idea. There were outlying clinics all over Pasadena and Houston, wherever. And the services that these people receive are really incredible. I will say also that the other day I took someone to an OB-GYN appointment at Ben's house. And normally I usually stay with the person and drive them back to Casawani to go. And I took her to Ben Top to her just a regular OB-GYN appointment at 1:30. And after 5 o'clock, I was driving her back, so I appreciate the you need to expand. Because it was just an ordinary appointment.
Yeah.
And 4 hours later, oh, it's not a happy driver.
Understandable.
But I can't say enough. Harris Health is just incredible serving these people. Most of us haven't had experience with Harris Health.
Yeah.
But it's an incredible organization, and you need to support it. The other thing I wanted to ask is I read about the concrete plant that's going across from the LBJ location.
Yeah,
Is TMO working on that?
so we've just started, we heard about that about a month ago as well, about the concrete plant, which is obviously for a number of reasons, worrisome, for health purposes, for environmental issues. So we've just started mostly our organizing capacities and energies. There's only 6 or 7 of us, organizers like myself. So most of it is focused on that, around this bond right now, but it's definitely something that's on our radar, and it's something that we've been talking about internally and trying to figure out ways like how could we sort of be a part of this conversation at the very least, or organize the people who should be a part of the congregation or the conversation around this concrete plant. But yeah, no, that's a good point. And yeah, like you were saying too, these hospitals, the doctors and nurses who staff them are great, and that's another thing that we hear a lot is that they always get great service when they, a large portion of time, get great service when they go to these hospitals, but that they're just, the capacities just aren't there. It kind of brings up a good point, is that similar bonds of like similar amounts of money to varying degrees, like slightly varying degrees, have been on ballots in both the county that Dallas sits in and the county that Austin sits in, multiple times at least, maybe once or twice, for both those cities, both those areas, over the last 20 years or so, and both of them have passed there. And so this is actually the first time in quite some time, and I think in the existence of Harris Health as in its current form, that they've ever come before the county and asked for this sort of money, or any really sort of big injection of funds like this.
I may have the wrong hospital, but the question still stands.
No worries.
Is any of this money gonna be dealt with on a flood mediation issue at Benton?
So
I haven't read anything.
No, that's fair. So I know a large portion of the fund is going into completely overhauling Bentop. I don't know what specific, everywhere specifically that the money will be going in, but I have to imagine that, or hope. Yeah.
Can't get there in floods.
Yeah, exactly. That retrofitting it for the floods that are sadly probably going to become more and more common in the greater Houston area would be on that list of, so I have to imagine that is, but I could specifically check that. It's a good question. Yeah.
What are the plans for more trauma center type of, aspects.
Yeah, so this is what, this plan would ideally create a totally new, it would expand the trauma capacities of the two hospitals already, and it would also create a hospital with a totally new capacities for trauma, for level 1 trauma, that is.
That would be a new, full-scale trauma center.
Yeah, at the new, I forget if they're calling it the new LBJ, I think they're calling it the new LBJ.
And then where that located, the north.
I think there's going to be one of the hospitals, and I'm not sure which one it is, going to be in the medical center, or yeah, in the medical center. And then, yeah, all these new clinics are going to be in outlying areas.
So there'll be 2 LBJs then.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. That's kind of confusing too, is that there'll be an old LBJ and a new LBJ. I don't know if they're sticking to the new. Yeah, I don't know if they're sticking to the, they're gonna call it the new LBJ, but
They
I'm
have plans for the TMC for this.
not sure.
It's pretty far, I mean, it's out, there's not too much.
Oh, I know LBJ is now,
Yeah,
but are they I'm asking for a new LBJ in the med center.
oh,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It says on the campus, on the LBJ campus, so
Yeah.
it must be already there.
Oh, so yeah, sorry, it's going to be on the LBJ, the current LBJ campus. not the current-
Makes sense.
the medical district campus, which is obviously very crowded right now with lots of other hospitals. My mistake.
All right, so in terms of capacity though, some of these other facilities are going to be out geographically in other locations, but to improve trauma access, I guess.
So those would be clinics. I'm not sure if the clinics will necessarily have trauma access, or trauma capacities, or those are just, the trauma capacities are solely at the hospitals themselves. But there will be new clinics. I'm not sure fully what their capacities will be.
All the trauma centers, one center, sort of central location.
Yeah. No, it is.
Two, right? So there's trauma at LBJ, way out
Yeah.
there, and then there's trauma in nurse.
Yeah.
Well, and theoretically, that would alleviate the fact that having to take someone to bed top.
Yeah.
If there's a clinic, but you don't each like, close, so that would be so much.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
I'm just curious, what are some other, it's not about the bond issue.
Yeah.
Other recent issues that TMO has supported?
Yeah, so for the past 2 Texas legislative sessions, so we also do stuff on the state level when the legislature is in session. Our kind of efforts and energies have focused around what could be casually described as corporate welfare, mainly in terms of energy companies, and things that we've targeted at various sections of tax code that we've targeted and located that we see as unfairly giving breaks to large energy companies at the loss of funding for schools in the state. So I forget that specific, there's some long numerical code for the tax code that I wasn't here, but earlier this last spring and the session beforehand was about fighting and lobbying on behalf of the defanging of this tax code to take away the loopholes that exist for energy companies to siphon off funds or to get special treatment and special funding at the loss of what we determine public entities like school and like health. So the last 2 legislative sessions have been focusing on that. There was and I am a little unsure of all the details, but I know that 2 legislative sessions ago, we got the tax code, the bit of the tax code repealed, and then it was reintroduced by some more conservative members of the legislature in the previous legislative session, and so our group and our statewide network essentially was lobbying to fight back against that, and then it ended up looking like a compromise of a measure. It ended up being not everything we wanted, but not as bad as we thought it could have been. So large something like that. But I mean, over the last 40 or so years, it's TMO kind of touches on everything. We've worked on things related to flood prep like making sure that specific areas of the community have like the flood infrastructure that is needed. Parts of the city that are heavily hit by flooding and don't necessarily have the infrastructure to mitigate that flooding. We've worked on things like getting a dialysis center added to some of the hospitals. That was something that I think happened 10 or so years ago. We've worked on, anything from, we had a big organizing effort during COVID around spreading awareness and education around getting vaccinated to various parts of the region. So we touch on everything from public health to public schools to corporate welfare to anything that we think there is a broad swath of our network and a broad swath of the general population like that they could get behind and see as this is something that is wrong that maybe needs to be righted.
How about I-45 expansion?
I-45 expansion, I would certainly be not a supporter of that. I don't know where our network lies right now in it. In terms of just like our capacity and our kind of manpower, we tend to just focus on one thing and then sort of sometimes there's things with like a neat ending date. So this has a kind of neat ending date, obviously, and the fact that there's election day. And so we try to find things that have like a neat ending date, whether that be at the end of a legislative session, whether that be an important vote on city council that's coming up. So that's kind of one of the factors that we think about. So if there's like kind of a neat timeline that an issue has and a neat ending date that we can, all right, this is what we're gonna do for this month, and this month, then we try to get behind it. Any other questions? So I'll say just one last thing is it'd be really, like I mentioned, that flyer for the accountability session next Sunday, 3 o'clock at St. Francis of the CC Church. Be great if anyone here decided to join us. It is going to be just like I think a cool display of the sort of community power and political power that we try to build as a network in the city. So that flyer shows you a little more info on it, and then there's a card, which is what like the commitment card that we were going around and gathering names of people who might be interested in A, joining us for that, and then B, working on the bond issue. But feel free to sign in if you're interested, and we can set more information and look forward to seeing you there.
You don't happen to have any signs for your car, do you?
Sorry, oh no, I know you asked for one, right? I heard about that.
Yeah, well, I can go by and.
I'd be more than happy. So we also, if you're interested, we also have yard signs that just say vote yes on this bond measure. So thank you all for joining me. If you have those cards, feel free to pass them up if you'd like to sign them. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're all glad that you joined us this morning. This is a short Sunday forum this time around. Thank you again, Sawyer. I appreciate you coming here and talking to us about this important bond election. I hope you can join us next week. We'll be having the Bishop Jim Hazelwood from the New England Synod. He'll be zooming in, talking to us about practices of everyday life, spirituality for your everyday life. Join us tomorrow, join us next week, same time, same channel, and we'll see you shortly in worship. Take care.